Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for being here, John. For all of you tuning in, John McCanney is the director for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Transition Small Business Innovation Research / Small Business Technology Transfer, aka SBIR or STTR Technologies Program. He currently oversees Technology Transition Acceleration within the Department of Defense, SBIR STTR program. He places an emphasis on innovative commercial and dual use capabilities, and he ensures components develop and transition technologies efficiently and at scale, with a focus specifically on rapidly transitioning warfighter priority, critical capabilities that align with the national defense strategy. A little bit about him. Previously, he served as AFWERX' chief of the innovation contracting branch. During that time, he worked with the DAF specific topic team and mission partner contracting offices to rapidly execute a $400 million annual portfolio, accelerated selection to award timing, streamlined DAF contracting processes. He previously was the AFWERX open topic SBIR STTR contracting sprints lead, and he spearheaded execution of over 5,000 contracts totaling more than $2 billion. He also served on the Air Force COVID-19 task force, leading DAF's rapid execution of the 300 million plus critical technologies. While he was at AFWERX, he received the Armed Forces Civilian Service Medal and the Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Innovation, and Contracting Award. So we are very excited to have someone with so much experience to talk to us today. And with that, I will turn it over to John. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. I just want to make sure everybody can still hear me.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
You are all good.
Yes. All right. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I apologize. We do a lot of things great in the DoD. We did a lot of things great in the Air Force. We still struggle with basic information technology. So I apologize. It doesn't look like video is going to be a thing for me today, but Chad from our team's driving the slides. And I hope this will be something pretty informative for everybody. We do a lot of outreach, throughout the year, both here at the OSD level and within the individual military services. So the Air Force, Army, Navy. To Andrew's point, when he was reading out the bio and was talking about DAF, that's Department of the Air Force, or the DAF. And for awareness, although many of you may know this, the DAF constitutes both the Air Force and the Space Force. So my background is primarily Air Force. So that's where I go with a lot of my language and my terminology and my program experience. So just know that whenever I say DAF or Air Force, we are also talking the Space Force. So not only the airmen that are over there wearing blue, but also the Guardians. So yeah, here today to talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on in the DoD SBIR program. Gina Sims, who's the director, her and I do a ton of these events. We'll always kind of put the caveat up front is when we talk about the program, if we talk about it and say the SBIR program, just understand that typically what we really mean is both the SBIR and STTR program. So these are two separate programs, sort of all under one larger program umbrella. So Chad, if you can go to the next slide.
There you go.
All right.
And John, I'm sorry to ask you, can you see the slides where you are as well?
I can see them just fine. Thanks, Chad.
Copy that. Thank you.
All right. So a little bit about the history of the program. So the SBIR program is a congressionally mandated program. So every few years, we go through a process with Congress where we work to hopefully get the program reauthorized. It's usually reauthorized for a period of 3 to 5 years. Again, all dependent on the Congress, all dependent on that particular budget cycle. But it is a full set aside for small businesses, right? So every business that is coming in and doing business with the larger government or here in OSD, particularly the DoD, is going to be a small business, meaning you are a business that has 500 employees or less. So the purpose of the program is to support scientific excellence and technological innovation. That is the SBA definition of the program. And then at the DoD level, we have our own sort of sub-definition, right? Which you can imagine being the Department of Defense is really focused on defense technologies, getting after the national defense strategy, achieving the demands of the department, right? The Secretary of Defense, the particular mission, services and components that fall underneath it. A number of authorities that sort of drive the direction of the program. So 15 USC Code 638 R&D and 15 USC Code 632, the Small Business Act, are the big ones. And then all of the rules and processes and sort of regulations that relate to the SBIR program are codified in the Small Business Administration's SBIR Policy Directive, or what we call the PD. If you're looking for an interesting read, and I'll let you use your own definition of interesting, I encourage you to go and Google or search the policy directive, and you can read all about the processes and the 3 phases of the program and how all the different rules are laid out. But that document is out there. It's published every few years. I think the most current version is of May 2023. So if you are searching it and you find an older version, just throw that one in the garbage, right? And make sure you use the most current version from May of 2023.
John?
Goals of the program? Yes.
How do you want to handle questions? Do you want us to interrupt you when the questions are put in the chat? Or do you want people to be able to ask them by voice? Or do you want Chad to manage the chat?
We can do questions as they come in the chat. If somebody just wants to say, hey, John, we've got a question, I am totally fine with that. We can be as conversational as this team wants to be. So I am happy to pause and just chat the program.
Okay, good. Then I have a question.
All right.
The current authorization is for what period of time?
The current that is an awesome question. This is the life we are living right now. The current authorization for the program ends at the end of this fiscal year, which is 30 September of 2025. So one of the things that we've been doing, getting after very, very aggressively the last few months, and will continue to do over the course of the spring and summer, is to work towards congressional reauthorization for the program. So there's been a number of hearings at both the Senate and House level. Again, I encourage folks to go and sort of tune into those hearings. They're all recorded. You can hear really interesting stories from mission partners all across the country. But we're doing that right now. So we are working with the program set to lapse here at the end of September. We are working towards reauthorization for future years.
Okay, and so what about, sorry to hog the questions. So there's only several months left. So are the different agencies working hard to expend as much budget as they have by approving, scalable, the really good ideas? Are they still working, extra hard on that part?
I would absolutely, right. And I would caveat that with the agencies, the components, they do that regardless of whether it's a reauthorization year or not. When it comes to the dollars and cents that the program executes, we still have to abide by all of the same obligation and expenditure rules that any other non-SBIR program has. So SBIR is a research and development program. So for those of you who aren't necessarily maybe super savvy in government lingo or fiscal law, we have what's called 2-year money. So our money is RDT&E funds, so it's good for 2 years. So we can obligate it for basically two fiscal years, and then there's a 5-year window in which the money needs to be expended. We have goals that we work towards to get dollars obligated as soon in the first fiscal year as possible. Right? The idea is you don't want to kind of be coming into August and September and you're trying to spend or obligate those expiring dollars, right? You want to get that money on contract as soon as possible, but you also balance that with mission need, right? We're not just going to put money on contract early just to get it on contract, especially at the DoD level, right? We're really looking for the most promising technologies, right? And if that means that we need to sit on our dollars for a little bit longer while we wait for our solicitations and our topics to work through the process to get after the best capabilities and the best innovation for the department, we'll do those things. But Maggie, to answer your question, yes, everybody is working extremely hard across the board to get their solicitations posted, right? Their topics, their proposals evaluated and selected, and then ultimately culminating with those most promising proposals turning into contracts and getting those on contract and funded.
Thank you.
John, we have another question in the chat as well, if you'd like to look at that.
Let's see. Oh yeah, I can see the chat.
Yeah, I can summarize it for you. This gal is in our session today, but apparently her brother tried to apply for funding and was not accepted. So she's trying to understand how does she know whether her idea is going to be acceptable or not?
Okay, that is a very broad question, so I'll give it a go. Right? There's a number of reasons that a proposal would get not accepted, right, or get not funded. Some of, like, we talk a lot about do's and don'ts, right? So it could be simply that there was something in the proposal submission that didn't follow the solicitation instructions, right? That's one of our most common sort of do's for when we talk to industry and our mission partners is you have to follow that solicitation. If it says you need to do A, B, and C, and you only do A and B, you may very well not be picked up because you didn't follow C. Right? It's a competitive process. We have to give everybody sort of that equal chance to receive awards. So you might have the greatest solution, but if you don't follow the solicitation requirements or you don't meet particular eligibility standards, you may not get picked up. Now, kind of taking it from a different lens, it's really important to understand that the SBIR program is incredibly competitive. So while we would love to fund every great idea that there is just not enough money. I mean, that is the reality. Right. And there's really not enough, even if there was enough money to fund everything, we wouldn't be able to do it anyways, right? Because we need people and organizations to in the government to be a part of this development process anyhow. But sometimes it just comes down to that. It's all right, we have, let's say, a topic and for a particular technology area, and they're going to fund the top 3 proposals that come in, and 15 proposals come in against that topic. Well, we know right from the start, there's going to be 12 companies that aren't going to be accepted purely because of the budget situation. But we can talk a little bit more about the do's and the don'ts a little bit later if we want. But I would say when you're putting together a proposal, it's really important to pay attention to those solicitation terms and conditions. And if it says that something is required, right? Let's say there's a form you need to submit. There's, one of the things that came about in the last authorization was foreign disclosure, right? And sort of our FOCI due diligence process, which we'll touch on a little bit. But if you don't submit that foreign disclosures form, right, they won't even look at your proposal. And it actually says that in the solicitation. If you don't submit this, not only it's a guarantee of not being selected, we on the government side won't even spend time reviewing your proposal because we know that we're not going to be able to select you.
Yeah, and John, you probably don't know this, but you are part of a speaker series for our FAST grant, which also includes an accelerator, which is starting April 8th. And so people should be applying for it now. And it is actually a competitive application for that as well. And if somebody presents their information in the application, if they're not accepted to the accelerator, it's probably because our experts think that it's not a viable idea. So this accelerator is going to happen twice this year, April 8th, and then again later in July, I think. And we've got experts that we bring in, including Earl Hager, who is on the call, that teach the classes. And then we have a central time period, which we call study hall, when people are actually supposed to be writing their proposals. And then they come back into the accelerator and there is review of what they've written. And the goal is to get them to actually push the submit button. We also have micro grants that are available for the application process, or phase 0 grants. Hi, Earl. That if they have up to 5,000 that they can apply to receive the reimbursement if they did actually apply. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is awesome to hear. I know that a number of the states have the FAST programs, right? And accelerators and incubators. There's so many good ways to get involved, right, as small businesses and sort of, learn the ecosystem and how to do things, good and right. And Maggie, you raised a great point when you talked about if it doesn't seem like a good fit, right? That's something else that when proposals are being submitted against any of our SBIR topics that's being looked at is that evaluation criteria, right? On the DoD side of the house, one of them is going to be defense need, right? Is there really a need for whatever you're bringing, whatever you're proposing? Is there a need for it in the Department of Defense, right? Another one of the evaluation criteria is going to be technical merit, right? Or some iteration of those words, right? does this solution actually have the technical viability that we need at the department level? So that sort of form, fit, function piece is really important as well. All right, Chad, you want to go to the next slide? All right, so a little bit on the budget, right? Everybody likes to know dollars and cents. SBIR is a really unique program. Again, I mentioned it's congressionally authorized, and the way the program is funded is based on the annual budget of the extramural RDT&E budget of the department or the agencies. That there's a formula then that is basically applied that determines what the SBIR and STTR budgets are going to be. So this is the budget breakout for FY24, right? We'll have different numbers for FY25. But what this basically means is for SBIR, the Army has an extramural budget of X dollars, and then SBIR takes essentially a tax of that at a rate of 3.2%. And that determines the Army's SBIR budget. Right, you can see down, if you go all the way down to the second to the last row, OSD, our office here, we have our own SBIR budget line as well. And you can kind of see here from, again, there's sort of a mix of how much dollars everybody has. There is one that stands out. Everybody will always say that it stands out because it has an extra digit, right? And that's the Air Force. The Air Force has the largest, by far, extramural RDT&E budget of all the services and components. Therefore, they have by far the largest SBIR budget as well. So you can see here, again, the number's about $3 billion between the two programs on an annual basis. Right, these numbers are changed a little bit for FY25 as well. Next slide. All right, so we've got some really incredible partnerships that we engage in, right? So each of your military services and the components obviously work. So for example, within Air Force, right? They work within Air Force Research Laboratory and the Life Cycle Management Center and the different Air Force PEOs. Here at the OSD level, we are partnered with a number of different program offices, CDAO, the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office. Some of you may have heard of that. Future G, Strategic Capabilities, Quantum, DHRA. So we've got some really awesome partnerships that we've established and worked through. So if you're looking at a topic, let's say in a solicitation, and it's an OSD topic, you may see that one of these organizations is really partnered with us on that. Next slide. All right, so these are some organizations that have expressed interest, and we've continuing that partnership, right? Just building out who we're working with. Again, a lot of that is that making sure that our entire sort of innovation ecosystem are all kind of tied in, not only aware of this program, but are using this program to meet their different needs, right? So you've got some examples here, the Joint Hypersonics Transition Office, DIU, who folks may or may not be familiar with, but I think most people are. CAPE, DCSA. So these are additional organizations at the DoD level that are starting to partner up with us here over in the OSD SBIR office. Next slide. Oh, did we miss one, Chad? I think we missed the phase slide.
Oh, sorry. Hit it twice.
Nope, you're good. Right, so this is the program phase, sort of an outline of how this program works, right? So generally speaking, you've got a phase one contract, so your solicitation is going to go out and it's going to be seeking phase one proposals. These are feasibility studies, smaller dollar value. These cap amounts that you can see here in the sort of in the right column, those are limits that are established by the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and then every component, every department, in an individual solicitation will set their individual caps for those. So you won't see too many phase ones solicitations that actually say you can submit proposals up to this $314,000 amount. Generally speaking, your phase ones are going to fall in the $75,000 to, let's say, $200,000 range. Same thing that happens with the phase twos. You can see the limit here is just a little bit under 2.1 million. But generally speaking, your phase two limitations identified in your solicitation or RFP are going to most likely fall in the $750 to about $1.8 million range. And those do change from solicitation to solicitation. And sometimes within a solicitation, they might be different from topic to topic. So again, it's really important when you're deciding whether or not to submit a proposal that you're looking at that solicitation, looking at that topic, and saying, hey, what are my limits here? So that you don't get disqualified or not selected for doing something as simple as submitting a proposal that's $1,000 over the limit for that particular topic. Within the phase 2 sort of role, we also have what's called direct to phase 2. Sometimes you'll heard of this referred to as D2P2. I've also heard of it referred as DP2, right? And those are exactly what they sound like. They're going to be solicitations or topics where there isn't a need based on the agency determination. There's not a need to do phase 1, to do feasibility studies. They're going to solicit directly for phase 2 proposals for sort of this research and prototyping work from the jump. Now, what's really important about direct to phase 2, we foot stomp this all the time, is it's the responsibility of the submitting company, right? So you as a potential SBIR offerer need to show the agency, need to show the department that you don't need to do a phase 1 to do feasibility because you've already done it, right? Or you're already able to demonstrate that through some avenue other than prior SBIR work, right? So this could be, hey, we're going to bring this innovative solution against, let's say, an Air Force topic, and we already do this in the commercial market, right? And here are our commercial customers. So we don't need to show you that this is feasible. It is feasible and it's being done, and here is how we do it. You actually need to build that into your D2P2 proposal. So again, if you're contemplating a D2P2 submission, I'm just going to strongly encourage everybody to really focus in the solicitation to the section that talks about that feasibility demonstration. Well, generally speaking, it is like bolded and underlined where it talks about how you need to show that feasibility has already been done in order to be considered for award. We also have things like phase 2 enhancements, right? Those vary by component, but these are programs sometimes referred to as our transition programs, where might be an existing phase 2 and we're really working towards something that shows real promise towards transition to a program of record. And maybe it needs some additional SBIR dollars, some additional RDT&E funds to sort of get there, right? So again, here at the OSD level, we've got our program, OTSD. That's the program that I'm the director of. Air Force has their program, StratFi TACFi. Army has a program called Catalyst. Navy has Catapult. I think I got that right. If not, switch them. Right. So they all have their own transition programs, and it's meant to really target those companies that are on phase 2 that have really promising strategies, really promising capabilities and innovations, but might just need a little bit more money to get across the finish line. All right. So that's sort of the phase breakout. All of that culminates when everything is perfect and the stars align, right? And your program office is loving what they've seen throughout your phase 1 and your phase 2 and maybe your enhancement. And all of it culminates with SBIR phase 3s, which is really when the aperture opens up. SBIR phase 3s are not funded with SBIR sitter dollars, right? They're not necessarily, they don't need to be RDT&E contracts, right? It really could be, hey, we've developed this software solution and now we're going to sell licenses to a mission partner in the government, right? And they're just buying copies of our licenses using the appropriate dollars for that. But a phase 3 contract could be any type of contract. It's really where, again, that sort of aperture opens up and you see the goodness that has materialized now from the development of phase 1 and phase 2 contracts. Right, so that's the phase structure a little bit. This slide also hits on some other things which I think are really important. So eligibility, right? How do you know that you're eligible to be a SBIR company? There are some very succinct and specific requirements, right? You have to, U.S. citizens must own at least 50% of the company, right? This is a program that is geared towards U.S.-based small businesses, right? So you must be located and operated in the United States. So even if you're more than 50% owned by U.S. citizens, but you're based out of, let's just say, Germany, right? You're not going to be eligible. You need to be located and operated here in the United States. and you have to have less than 500 employees. Right, so that's a hard standard for SBIR phase 1s and phase 2s. What's really cool about phase 3s, right? If we talk about graduating the program and developing and hopefully sort of launching into that phase 3 universe, is if you're a small business and you grow beyond that 500 employee limit, it does not preclude you from being able to receive future phase 3s based on the work you've done. Right? The idea there is, why would we punish small businesses that have utilized the program, right, or have benefited from the program and have grown and are now super successful above 500 employees? Well, now they can't get SBIR phase 3s anymore. Nope. You could still get SBIR phase 3s off the SBIR work that you've done. It just precludes you from being able to submit future phase 1s and phase 2s. So just another great benefit of SBIR phase 3s. We could do an entire briefing on SBIR phase 3s. It's actually a topic that I talk to a lot of different innovation groups on quite a bit, in contracting organizations and things like that. But SBIR phase 3s are a really great contracting vehicle. Right, and then just some differences between the program, right? I mentioned at the beginning, it's sort of 2 programs within one larger umbrella, right? So under SBIR, for your phase 1 proposals, as the small business, you have to be doing at least 2/3 of the work. So there's a little bit of an opportunity to partner, right, and do some subcontracting if need be. But you, as the proposing small business, have to be doing at least 2/3 of the work. When you get to that phase 2 level, that standard goes down a little bit. You have to be doing at least half of the work. So again, with phase 2, you see more of this continued development, researching, and prototyping, but you're focusing on commercialization. So maybe you need to partner up with a large prime, right, who might have that commercialization expertise, for example, that you're looking for. So phase 2, half the work needs to be done by the proposing small business, and then the small business must be the principal investigator's primary employer, right? So the individual who you name as your PI, they call it, for the project, has to be employed by the small business who's actually submitting those proposals. STTR's just a little bit different, right? The big difference between STTR is that first bullet that's bolded there. For a company to be eligible for a STTR, whether it's a phase 1 or a phase 2, they must be partnered with a US-based research institution, right, or what we call an RI. Generally speaking, those are universities, but there's some other categories that meet the definition of an RI as well. And under both SBIR phase 1s and SBIR phase 2s, the small business has to be doing at least 40% of the work. The partnering research institution has to be doing at least 30% of the work. And then the remaining 30%, right, because public math says 40 plus 30 doesn't equal 100. The remaining 30%, right, that's the discretionary work. It can be that you as the small business are doing 70 and the RI is doing 30. It can be you're doing 40 and the RI is doing 60, right, or any other combination thereof. You could also bring a third party in to meet that other 30%, right? And then in the instance of STTR, the principal investigator can be employed either by the small business or by the partnering research institution, right? So another little caveat there. All right, so that's a whole bunch on phases and eligibility and sort of uniquenesses of the program. So Chad, why don't we jump to the next slide? All right, and a little bit on the program lifecycle. So, hey, how does this program work, right, from a solicitation perspective, from a topic perspective? So it all starts at topic development, right? So this is where, at the OSD level and at the different component levels, we're working with the different groups within those respective organizations to sort of solicit ideas and develop topics. This is a government process here. Develop topics that are identifying the respective needs of those departments or agencies, right? So it's a collection of innovative ideas, the warfighter needs, right? And then you have both open topics and what we call traditional topics, or sometimes you may hear of them referred to as specific topics. So all of those topics go through a really rigorous certified approval process. The best ones are sort of selected, right, and then put into that solicitation document, right, which goes out and says, here's the solicitation, here are the topics, here's who the sponsor organizations are, this is what we're looking for. These are the ideas that we're looking for. We've got a great consistent schedule, which we're going to talk to in one of the future slides here, so I'm not going to spoil that. Solicitations are going to be issued in Defense Cyber Sitter. They're going to be issued as either a broad agency announcement, BAA, or a commercial solutions opening, or a CSO. So DoD is really unique in that you see both of these solicitations that are out there. Broad agency announcement has been the typical approach over the last, let's say, 30 to 40 years of the SBIR program, with the sort of piloting of what was known as the Defense Commercial Solutions Opening Authority in like the 2018 timeframe. What you saw was CSOs starting to be introduced as well, right? And we don't need to go down the FAR, DFARs. This is the difference between a BAA or a CSO here. That's, again, a whole nother category in and of itself, or a whole other briefing in and of itself. But all that is to say is within DoD Cyber Sitter, you'll see multiple solicitations, which may be either a broad agency announcement or a CSO. Solicitation goes out, topics are out, then it's proposal submission. Here in DoD, we've got a centralized proposal submission portal. It's called DCIP, so our Defense Cyber Innovation Portal, I believe is what it stands for. So all of our phase 1 and our phase 2 proposals, if you're choosing to submit, they're all going to get submitted into DCIP, right? And then kind of everybody who needs access to it on the government side for purposes of evaluations and everything like that, get all their data through DCIP. So works really, really great for the department because we've got all of our data, all of our information, all in one location. It's a standardized process. Doesn't matter. It makes it really simple for our small businesses to follow. You go to Defense Cyber Sitter, you get a DCIP account, and you walk, as you're going to submit a proposal, it walks you right through the proposal development and submission process, including a number of those mandatory forms and things like that that you might need in order to submit. Once the solicitation is closed, right, and the topics are closed, everything's shut down, you can't submit any more proposals, then the components and the agencies go about their respective evaluation and selection process. All right, so they're going to do evaluations in accordance with the stated evaluation criteria, right? And then that ultimately culminates in the selection of the highest rated proposals, right? Assuming there is funding, because there needs to be dollars. And then selection notices are issued, and then everybody works towards contract award.
So John, there's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
And it's from Hesh. He's saying, are both of these programs typically for companies developing technology for the government specifically?
Yes, Cyber Sitter is a program that is looking for innovative and novel solutions for the government, right? And what we're talking about here is the Department of Defense, right? So you will hear sometimes if you're talking Cyber Sitter and you're talking external to the DoD, let's say you're talking to NSF or NIH, organizations that are focused on research, you might hear them talking about awarding cyber as grants, right? Which is, hey, money is handed out and kind of go do the research. DoD works everything as contracts because we're looking for solutions that are actually going to benefit the warfighter, right? We are taking delivery of what is being built for us. But yes, everything is being built and sort of designed for the government.
All right. I think though that the question is more about what if I already have a solution that would translate to being something that a warfighter could use?
So that would be where you would want to build that into your proposal and say, I have this thing. Mm-hmm. If it's something you already have, though, and it's not going to require research and development, it's not going to require RDT&E funding to sort of develop it and build it and get it into a warfighter system, SBIR may not be the right avenue, right? Because SBIR is a research and development program. It is focused on developing there's a big focus on dual use capabilities right now. If it's something that you just have and it is, hey, I have this, it's developed, I don't need to adapt it or redesign it for the defense need, I just need to sell it directly to DoD, you may need to look to a program or a solicitation approach outside of Cyber Sitter in order to make that work. If you were to just say, hey, I've got this software tool, right, and I just want some customer I just want you to buy it, and that's what your proposal says through SBIR, it's not going to get picked up. We can't just buy software through the SBIR program. It actually has to be a development process. I see some other questions just came in. So let's see. So different agencies offer SBIR grants for different government purposes, not just defense. Yep. So again, if you look at a non-defense organization, you may see that they're soliciting, let's say, proposals for research that are not related to defense technologies, right? And they may say, we're going to award these as grants, right? Not asking for any deliverable. There's not going to be any software or hardware or sort of, widget, right? To just use the old term that's at the end of this. We're really just looking to research certain things. Is the U.S. Forest Service covered under the DLA and eligible for SBIR application? I don't know where the U.S. I apologize. I don't know where the U.S. Forest Service falls. DLA does fall under us here in big DoD, right? So DLA will have their own DLA specific topics. I don't know if Forest Service is a part of that, though. I apologize. All right. So some changes and initiatives, right? Some great things that have been going on and have already happened in FY25, and then what's coming in the future. Solicitation schedule. This is something that's been, I think, something that we've been mulling over for years, right? Like, what's the best solicitation schedule? How frequently should we be putting out solicitations and topics and this, that, and the other thing? So we made some significant changes there. Really proud of the fact that we've reduced the solicitation instructions, right? A barrier to entry for small businesses for years now, right? And this is not unique to SBIR, is, man, these solicitations are so long and so complex and so complicated, right? I don't even have the time to sit down and digest them, let alone consider putting together a proposal. So I think we kind of were able to finally shuffle through everything recently. And I believe our solicitation instructions was reduced by almost 50% in this last year, right? So let's just say, hypothetically, it used to be a 60-page solicitation with instructions. It's now down to 30, right? We're doing that because we hear what small businesses are saying. There's too much here. There's tons of duplicity. It's complicated. We don't even know how to sort through this. And then you want us to put a proposal together in a month or 2 months. We can't do those things. So we've made a huge effort to reduce those solicitation instructions. We've also automated our foreign disclosure form, which is a huge plus, right? No more manual filling it in and trying to jam the document in. And sometimes the system doesn't want to accept a certain document type, anything like that. So that mandatory foreign disclosure form is now all automated. So when you go into DSIP and you're submitting your proposal, it's just a part of the kind of click-through process. And then our initiatives, again, I mentioned reducing the barriers to entry. That's always going to be an initiative. Whatever we can do within reason to reduce those barriers to entry for small business, right, and continue to bring new entrants in and sort of kind of get after this revitalization of the defense industrial base. We're going to do those things, again, within reason and within what's permissible by law. Right, and also provided that it's sort of consistent with the direction of our department and the leadership. Continuing collaboration across the department, right? And this is collaboration not only internally here in the government, right? Working with our different military services and components and agencies to make sure we're kind of operating as a unified innovation ecosystem when it comes to SBIR, but also collaborating outside the department with the small businesses, right, and the large primes, because they're a big part of SBIR too. They don't get to submit proposals, but they're very. It's very common to see your large primes as mission partners, right? So just continuing that collaboration is going to be really important. And then we already touched a little bit on reauthorization, but that's a huge initiative this year, right? Because if we're not authorized, we can't really run the program. It's as simple as that. So really big efforts ongoing right now. Focused on reauthorization. Senator Ernst recently released the draft of the Innovate Act, right, which is going to be a driving force associated with SBIR. So encourage you all to to go and sort of read up on that as well. And you'll see some language in there that's sort of common themes that we've talked about here too, when it comes to, transition, and phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 strategies and the like. There we go. So here's our current solicitation schedule. So I mentioned that was one of the big initiatives in FY25 that we rolled out with. So previously, for at least, let's say 15 plus years, I think it's been, you would generally see SBIR solicitations released about 3 times a year. Right? So about every 4 months, a solicitation would come out, and it might have 20, 30, 40, 60, 100 different topics underneath it. FY25 was a different story. What we were able to do is roll forth with kind of this rolling solicitation schedule where we have monthly releases, right? And the schedule is standardized. So every month, the first week, a release goes into what we call pre-release. Pre-release is a time where industry can see the topics that are coming and can actually ask questions of the sponsoring organizations, right? So there's a process through DSIP where if you've got a question about a particular topic or a capability that's discussed, you can ask questions about that. And then those questions and answers get posted in DSIP for everybody to see. It's called Citus, right? And it's meant to be that sort of open dialogue time for folks to talk with those mission partners about what do you mean by these particular topics? So then when it actually opens, you can see here, usually 3 or 4 weeks later, now those questions have been addressed. Everybody can see the answers to that. Hopefully that leads to better proposals, right? And more robust competition. So we are right now sitting here at March 21st, right? So if we just were to kind of put that in here, we're in the middle of release number 5, not really the middle. We're towards the end of release number 5. So if you're a company that's going to submit a proposal against release number 5, you got like 5 more days, get moving. And then release 6 is in pre-release right now. So you can go on, see release 6. And if you've got questions on any of those topics, you can see that the Q&A will be posted. Once pre-release ends, it is really important to understand, once the pre-release stage ends and the solicitation opens, you now no longer have access to those technical points of contact to ask those questions, right? Because again, it's now a competitive process. The solicitation is open. The government team has to basically take a step back and say, time for small businesses to submit their proposals, right? So leverage that pre-release stage to really review those topics and see if you've got questions, and ask them before that solicitation actually opens up. Again, the goal of this sort of rolling 12 release cycle is to have that repeatable schedule for small businesses. So you all know, hey, Defense SBIR Sitter, every month they're going to release, topics. And some months you might see that maybe it's there's a bunch of Air Force topics one month, and the next month it's Army, and then the next month after that it's Navy and some more Army and a combination Air Force. There's going to be different components and different agencies putting their topics within those individual releases. It also helps the services and components, right? Because they might not, it may not work really well for them under the old schedule. Now they also have flexibility to say, all right, well, it doesn't really make sense for us for whatever reason to submit or to push topics into, let's say, release 5, but we really like that window that release 6 gives us. That really works for our program teams and our evaluators, right, and our contracting shops on the back end that are going to be doing these awards. So we're going to put our topics into that one, right? Or we're going to split our topics between 6 different releases over the course of the year. A lot of flexibility that's built in there.
John, we have a question in the queue.
All right. Is it the any general advice for software developers?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any general advice for software developers looking to get started on here? Do you have any success stories you could share? Really appreciate you mentioning that we shouldn't try to pitch pre-built software as a process of development alongside government is a necessary part of this. I mean, yeah, we have lots of success stories. Your success stories really come from your organizations that utilize the program, right? So Air Force has lots of success stories. If you want to go to the AFWorks website, AFWorks is the SBIR Sitter program office. for the Department of Defense. So AFWERX has lots of success stories. I know just 2 or 3 weeks ago, I believe they announced their most recent StratFi selections, which those are their real big ticket, high priority phase 2 enhancement selections that they've made. So there's all sorts of success stories. SBIR.gov, SBA's SBIR website, they have lots of success story information as well. Software is absolutely something that all of the components and all of the services are looking for as well. I would caveat software with, if you're paying attention to the news and watching things, SecDef just released a really, really important, and I would say very valuable memo on how the department is going to acquire software. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if that's going to be something that is necessarily called out specifically in SBIR solicitations, because when SBIR solicitations go out, they're not just saying, hey, we're looking for software solutions, but just understanding those things is really important. I hope that's general enough, while not necessarily losing the flavor of SBIR Sitter. And then where are these components available? So the components, I'll try to answer it the way I'm reading the question, which is, how do you have access to them if the components have topics and questions? So the questions, if during that pre-release stage, let's just say the Army has topics that are out there, you're going to submit your questions into the Citus tool, which is part of this whole DSIP portal. And those Army component, those people that are sort of behind the topics, they're going to be the ones that answer those questions. So you essentially have access to them during that pre-release stage. Sorry, and I see that there was a follow-up at SecDef, so Secretary of Defense, not SecDev.
I just put some information in there about StratFi, TACFi, because you mentioned it, John.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I will say, again, I have this tendency, right, and I'm trying to get better at it, right? I will default to the Air Force a lot because that's really the universe that I know really well. But for example, just yesterday, I was on the Army's transition program website as well, and there's a ton of great information about their program as well. So really, really good stuff. Now, you don't necessarily want to go, I wouldn't say spend a ton of time understanding those particular transition programs until you're into the ecosystem, right? Until you're actually let's say on a SBIR phase 2 with the Army. If you're like, hey, I'm really interested in their transition program, you have to have a phase 2 with them to be sort of eligible for that. But it is really important, I would say, to understand, at least at face value, how those programs operate, right? And then the program that I run here at OSD, the OTST program, again, that's our OSD level transition program. So we work with everybody, all the different services and components. Sometimes something doesn't work, right? It doesn't meet, let's say the StratFi standards, but it's a need for the Air Force. They may come to OTST and work with us for a transition activity as well. And we have similar sort of rules and requirements. Again, you have to be an existing SBIR phase 2 in order to be eligible for our program. All right, next slide. I think it's a DSIP portal, right?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know how we jump to the DSIP. I can go back to DSIP if you want.
That's all right. It's just a snapshot of the DSIP portal. Why don't we go to the due diligence slide, because I think that's really, really important.
Copy that.
Right. So when the program was reauthorized, we're really short on time, so I'll spend like 1 minute on this. But when the program was reauthorized with the SBIR Sitter Extension Act of 2022, you see here Public Law 117-183, this was the biggest change to the program. And I would say this is one of the biggest changes to the program probably in the last 20, 30 years, right, is this assessment of security risks prior to award, right? And this is, it kind of seems obvious, but it's really, really important. We need to understand and make sure that we know who we're doing business with, right, and what those affiliations are, right? So again, we've talked a little bit about the foreign disclosure form, right? It's the form that I mentioned that was automated now, but it's a mandatory thing that you have to submit every time you propose, and it's going to disclose those foreign affiliations that you may have, right? Allows the government to conduct individual reviews with public information. right? And then a risk-based review based on the above mentioned data points, focusing on things like cybersecurity practices, patent analysis, employee analysis, and a foreign ownership of an SBC. If you want to know the details, the OSD memo that was signed out on FOCI due diligence was signed out by the DepSecDef, so Deputy Secretary of Defense, in May of 2024. If you just put OSD due diligence memo, just throw it into Google, you can read the entire OSD memorandum. You can see the risk threat matrix. You can see exactly what is going to be assessed as part of the foreign disclosure review, the FOCI due diligence every single time. This is a critical review process for us as a department, right? Again, to make sure that we understand who the small businesses are, right? And it benefits you all as small businesses too, because if there's, let's say, nefarious actors who are just sort of standing up small businesses and trying to get into the program for the purpose of being essentially stealing intellectual property, right, or getting dollars from the government, it really is a disadvantage to you all as well, right, who may be actually trying to bring promising solutions, not stealing intellectual property, but you're being boxed out by these bad actors. So it's really important for us all as an innovation sort of ecosystem, including the small businesses, to make sure that we have a robust and reliant due diligence program. So that is all I've got for slides, but I think there's probably some more questions.
We got a quick question, John, about how do you become eligible for the transition program?
It's going to depend on which particular program. So I'm just going to caveat everything with that. But in order to, the biggest one to be eligible for one of the transition programs, like a StratFi or an OTST, you have to be an existing SBIR company, right? You have to have had a phase 2. We can't transition any activities that don't actually have a starting point, right? To bridge the valley, right? If you've all heard that term, bridging the valley of death. In order to be able to bridge it, we're saying, hey, we've got capabilities that we've been developing or have developed through SBIR, but they just need a little bit more, right? So I'll use my program OTST as an example. If somebody comes to us, we're looking for, okay, well, what'd you get accomplished under the phase 2, right? What's your end state, right? What's your transition path look like? Who's your program offices that are interested in it? Do they have money programmed in out years to actually see whatever it is you're bringing to the table, to actually see this through into sustainment or acquisition program of record? Right? Are there dollars there? Are they willing to bring non-SBIR money matching funds to the table right now? Right? Like if that's the case, hey, maybe we've got a nice opportunity here. Right. So all that is to say is you really have to look at each of the individual programs. StratFi has some very specific requirements, right, where you have to bring certain levels of matching funds in order to be considered. So just make sure if you're considering applying against any of the transition programs, you really focus on what their requirements are.
There's another one in the chat, John, about a report this morning showing SBA will cut staff by 43%. Will this slow down the process for the defense or other agencies?
Yeah, I apologize. I can't really comment on anything related to any reports regarding SBA cuts or anything like that. All I really can say is from our perspective, our position here at OSD is we run the SBIR program for the Department of Defense.
Copy. Then one other one in there about patent analysis. Can you explain that?
I can't explain patent analysis as a guru or to any level that would probably be of value to folks. However, if you go and just Google search that OSD due diligence memo, you're going to see exactly what is meant by patent analysis. You're going to see exactly what they're looking for, how the threat matrix is built out, what the different ratings mean, everything like that, right? And then it's up to each of the respective component agencies to utilize that sort of threat matrix process to conduct their risk-based due diligence reviews.
I also put a link to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as well.
Perfect.
There's actually a lot more than just getting a patent from the patent office. I think their analysis
It's
probably goes deeper into whether the patents are worth anything.
Right.
All right.
so
Any last
focus.
thoughts, John?
No, I was just going to say, so just as a foot stomp. So when we're talking about due diligence, is it a FOCI due diligence review? So when you're talking about when it's looking at sort of employee analysis, right, and these things from relationships with foreign countries, again, read the memo. There are particular countries, foreign countries of concern, right, that are really the ones that are being looked at. So strongly encourage folks, again, understand if you're considering taking VC money, right, understand where those dollars are coming from, right, and what impact that could have on you and your ability to potentially be competitive for something like SBIR.
All right, so that's interesting. It's not the fact that you're taking VC money, but it could be the fact that if the VC money is coming from foreign countries, that could be a problem.
It could potentially be a problem. Absolutely.
Oh, okay, but it's not the fact that it's venture capital.
Not the fact that it's venture capital.
Okay.
No. And in fact, Maggie, one of the things that you'll see with the transition programs, right, StratFi in particular, and Army has implemented this as well, as there's actually a strong push to start to fuse that venture capital into some of these, right? So the StratFi proposals they do that solicitation usually about once a year, or that opportunity about once a year. You'll see that there's a mandatory requirement for those StratFis that for every $1 of SBIR, there needs to also be $1 of non-SBIR government money and $2 of private capital, right? Because they want to be able to show for those that they're really fusing all of this money together. And it's not just defense tech, it's dual use defense tech. It's technologies that have both defense and commercial application, right? And the FAR says that. So the FAR, for all its shortcomings, sometimes people may say, the FAR starts with, we should be buying commercial, right? It's right there. It's in the early stages. I don't know how long the FAR is anymore. It's really long. But you've really seen a major turn in DoD towards sort of this dual use defense capabilities, and VC is a huge part of that, right? Because small businesses don't always have the money, the cash flow to operate. So there's an understanding that the VC community is a big part of the future success of the Defense SBIR program.
Wonderful. We got a few last minute questions, but it's 1 o'clock now. So if people want to stick, and if you can stick for a few minutes, we can answer those questions. I just wanted to invite everybody to our next speaker event, which is April 18th. It's going to be Bill Renee from a company that used to be called CID. They're about to go public. And he's going to be talking about his journey through SBIR and then the contracts that they got later through the DLA. So that's April 18th, also at noon on a Friday. And the other questions in the chat, and thanks everybody for coming. Somebody asks if there is a tech transfer program through DoD.
I see that on the topic of IP. Not aware of an IP tech transfer program we have, but really when we talk about our transition programs here, IP is an inherent part of that, right? It wasn't really discussed in the slides, but on the IP front, so all SBIR Phase 1s, SBIR Phase 2s, and SBIR Phase 3s, when they're awarded, the government is going to receive what's called SBIR data rights, right? So it's just sort of an inherent part of the process.
Okay, but SBIR data rights, the small business retains the IP, but you guys get rights to it. Yeah,
there's rights to it. Yep,
that's an important distinction. Okay, and then Earl is one of our consultants, and you can read his comment.
Had a client have his SBA loan application terminated because they had a foreign company with a 4% stake in the company. Earl, I apologize. That's not going to be one that I'm going to be able to answer for a variety of reasons. I don't know how the SBA, I'm not SBA. I don't know how they what their rules or regulations are on their loan applications. But I think to your point, what you're saying there is, I don't know who the foreign company was, right, or where they were located, but that's an example to me of, hey, just because it might be small, right, in terms of percentages or dollars, it's who, right? Sometimes it's that who is the company or where are they located that can actually become a real big tripping point.
The country was Japan, so it's somebody who shouldn't have been on the list.
That is
And
interesting.
China is a really bad name to use, obviously, but there's a big push to keep everything internal to the U.S. ownership, everything across the board. So if you're doing anything at all in this SBIR, STTR space, keeping everybody associated with the United States is important at this point.
Yep.
And then
I see Troy
asks,
has.
yeah,
Oh,
if
yep.
his
Reading the
product is
same
made
question,
elsewhere. Yeah.
If all or part of our projects is manufactured overseas. So if your proposal is talking about it is going to involve the work or something being produced overseas, it's most likely going to be ineligible, because at that point, Troy, your work is going to be happening overseas. And based on the rules and regulations and standards of SBIR, the work has to be conducted in the United States. And then I see Hector's got a question on the minimum matching funds available to apply. Hector, that will depend on the particular program, on the particular transition program. So from a SBIR phase 1 and SBIR phase 2 perspective, there is no requirement for matching funds. If a mission partner wants to bring matching funds, they can, but there's no matching funds required at the phase 1 and phase 2 level. And then when it comes to a transition program, like an OTSG, like a StratFi, like a Catapult, all going to be based on those respective programs and their published standards.
That seems to be all the questions we have right now. So John, I want to thank you and Chad for both joining us today and being so agreeable to just wandering wherever the questions took us, but also covering a lot of information. It was really helpful. Why don't you try turning your camera on really briefly so people can see you?
Yeah. It's not working. It's not,
Okay.
But I'm on LinkedIn. Gina will always say this too. Like we exist as this program office. We exist for you all, right? So please feel free to reach out to us. Chad's given you a wealth of resources. Everybody's going to be busy into the afternoon, just clicking on links that Chad put out there. Awesome work. But yeah, you can find me. Again, I've been around this program for a really long time. I don't know if I want to say Google me, because I don't know what you'll find, but you'll probably find some SBIR stuff. You'll probably find some SBIR stuff out there. But what we are happy to, answer questions that folks have. If you're a company that has an existing phase 2, right, and you've either been a part of OTST or you want to be a part of OTST, right? We're here, we're listening, we're working with, dozens of companies right now, tens of dozens of customers that want to leverage the program. So happy to have those conversations. Just always have to caveat it with, there are some times where we're just not able to talk about things, right? Or if you come and you're like, hey, I've got a question on this topic, right? And it's an open solicitation, we have to shut that down. We can't answer, right? We can't, it's a competitive advantage, right? It would be giving you an unfair treatment that everyone else doesn't get. So just understand if you reach out and sometimes you're kind of getting that, like getting the Heisman, right, or getting the cold shoulder, or you're asking a really direct question and you're not getting a direct answer. Sometimes it's because we're just not permitted to do that. But we try to be as open as we can be on everything.
John, our socials are on the screen as well.
Yep, Chad's got Chad, you always have everything ready to go. So.
All right. Well, thanks again, gentlemen, John and Chad. Thanks so much. And this video will be edited and then posted to our YouTube channel that is called the SBIR Speaker Series. And Andrew is also going to add it to our Disco platform. So if you get your information that way, it'll be there too.
Awesome.
Maggie.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chad.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
So long.